I'm James Rule. Welcome to the Lonely Leader podcast, where we help existing and aspiring leaders find clarity, build resilience, drive performance, and enhance fulfillment. Welcome to part 2 of Feedback Culture, the secret of high-performing teams. In the last episode, we talked about giving feedback, and if you haven't listened to that, please do make sure you jump back and listen following this one. And today we're talking about the other side of the coin, receiving feedback. Now, I don't want to reiterate all the points I made in the last episode, but in case you're diving straight into this without listening to the other one, I want to just reiterate the simple premise of why feedback is so important. I have seen some truly high-performing teams in elite sport, where I spent a lot of my career, both as a professional rugby player, but predominantly as a chief executive of 2 professional rugby clubs, and also in business. And the benefit of being able to embed within those high-performing teams and study them is you find themes, you find models of best practice, and you find those themes repeated continually in all of the high-performing teams. And one of those themes is the ability to communicate well, and specifically, because communication can take us down a variety of different roads, specifically the ability to give and take feedback. Why is it so important? If we don't feedback continually, we don't learn. We don't get a chance to reflect and say what went well, what didn't go well, and what are we going to do about it? And so those models of best practice, we don't get to take the learnings from them and embed them in our wider team. And equally, when things are not working, we don't have the ability to learn and then embed those learnings to prevent other people from making the same mistakes. Now, common sense, I hear you saying, absolutely it is, but common sense isn't always common practice. And in both episodes, I'm talking a little bit about why this loop, this ability to continually give and take feedback, doesn't work as well as it should. And it's really easy for leaders to sort of sit in that ivory tower and say, well, I push instructions out. If that's your mindset, you're not going to be in leadership for very long. Feedback is in essence a mirror, and the best leaders don't shy away from their reflection. They embrace it, they learn from that feedback, they evolve, they improve, and they enhance the impact of their leadership. So as we step into this episode, remember the principal benefit. Why am I wanting you to reflect on this? You want to be a high-performing leader. That's why you're consuming content such as this. You want your team to be the highest performing team. That is part of your legacy as a leader, to help raise everybody's level of performance and optimize it for the benefit of them as individuals and the wider business that you are tasked with leading. So feedback is that X factor. It's the ability to gain insights from all touch points in your organization, from your most senior to your most junior of staff. It's ensuring that those lines of communication are open. It's about preventing the same mistakes being repeated over and over, which is the definition of madness. If something goes wrong, we learn from it, we fix it, we help other people avoid it. And it's also about finding those routes, those shortcuts, those hacks, if you will, that bring success, and sharing those so people can accelerate their learning and enhance their performance. Against that backdrop, I hope every single one of you will say, well, that's stating the obvious. Of course I want that. Of course we want it. So now, having set that context, please walk with me through this. Listen to some of the barriers that I believe stop people from being able to receive feedback effectively, and turn that light back on yourself and think, do I do that? And then I will share, as I always do in every episode, a series of takeaways that I believe you can start implementing immediately today to enhance your ability to receive feedback. And as with all the learnings we discuss, first and foremost, I'm talking to you as an individual to enhance your personal performance. But all of this, I hope, trickles out into your colleagues, the people that you are tasked with leading. So ultimately, at the end of this series, you will be better at giving and taking feedback, but also your team will be, and the rising tide lifts all boats as a consequence. So, why don't we receive feedback particularly well? Well, fundamentally, our ego gets in the way. And I will distill that down into the triple Ds. First one, we get defensive. We're just hardwired not to like to hear criticism. Our ego drives us to take it personally. We think it's an attack on our character, and we don't have the strength to say, hang on, let me look at this as a specific piece of feedback on an incident, an element of performance, as a learning opportunity, as opposed to, well, they're attacking me and my integrity. That latter position is where most of us drift to, and it closes our minds, it closes our ability to really listen or embrace the growth opportunity that's been presented in that feedback. Which takes us nicely into our second D, deflecting. Rather than have the courage to say, let me sit with this, let me reflect on what you're telling me, let me see whether I agree deep down or not, let me try and take the emotion out of this, we deflect. We deflect it back on the giver. We start repositioning that negative feedback and protecting our own identity, our own sense of self-worth by trying to apportion the reason these situations didn't perform in the way that we expected is not because of your inefficiency and your substandard performance. It's because of other external factors, whether that's resource or people. So we deflect to try and hope that nobody's going to think lesser of us as a performer, as a leader. And the last of the Ds, dismissing the source of the feedback. This sounds harsh, but you may have done it. I'm sure you've seen it happen. Rather than embrace the negative feedback or the constructive criticism, shall we say, we discredit the source. They're not experienced or qualified or senior enough for us to take that feedback seriously. Sounds deluded when you break it down. Why are we getting so defensive? Why are we deflecting? And why are we discrediting the source? Because we're taking it personally. Now, I always pivot across to sport. It doesn't matter if you're a sports fan or not, but you will understand that I use a lot of sporting analogies in this because this is a big part of my career. I spent time as a professional player and I spent time as a CEO of sporting organisations. Whatever your sporting affinity, whether you're passionate or not, just picture the scene of a sporting team. Soccer, football, NFL, NBA, netball, hockey, cricket, it does not matter. There will be a series of fixtures, a series of matches happening one week after another, sometimes several within 1 week in certain sports. You have to be able to prepare for that game, preview, perform in that game, and then review. And so this feedback loop is happening each and every week. Imagine if after every game, people were defensive, dismissive, discredited. It would just be absolute chaos. But that doesn't happen. The game is replayed, often on big 60-inch TVs, and the coach or a series of coaches will walk people through, rewind certain clips and say, what went wrong there? What went right there? How do we learn from that? Asking specific questions, talking to individuals and groups within the team so that everyone can see, reflect, and learn. There is absolutely zero space for people to get defensive because it's not an attack on their character. Think about this logically. Somebody might be the best player on the field 1 week, maybe the second week, maybe the third week. But if there's 40 games in a season, I guarantee they will not be the best player every single week. And all the players accept that. There are periods where you're in form, periods when you're out of form. So they accept that feedback will come and good work will be recognized and endorsed, and poor performance and poor work will be addressed. Not in an aggressive way, but in a way to learn and move forward. So there's no need to deflect. It's part of being a high performer. Why do I use that sporting analogy? Think of you as a professional. I would love to say January rolls around and from January to December, you are elite in everything that you do, world class, highest performer in the organization, in your sector, globally. Well, it's complete delusion. You will have, just like the elite athlete, periods where things are going very well, and you will have areas, times, periods, weeks, quarters, whatever it may be, where it's not going as well. So there is just no space to be defensive, to deflect and discredit, because you're actually undermining your own ability to get back into form. Why would you close off all the innovation and the insight around you, the guidance, the support that can help get you back on track? So it really is complete nonsense when we get into the detail of this to think receiving feedback should be one of our number one priorities in every aspect of our life. I often pivot outside of our profession, but why would you naively bumble along, think that your relationship with the people you love the most, your partner, your children, your siblings, your parents, is absolutely A1 in a perfect place? Why presume that? Why not explore it? Seek feedback. Am I doing everything you need from me? Our professional roles are no different. So I hope I've sowed some seeds of reflection there to sort of push our ego down and out of the way to allow us to step into, and maybe for some of you, for the first time ever, to truly step into the ability to receive feedback. So I want to go into some of the areas that can help you do that immediately. But as ever, let's just pull out a couple of names of people that are very, very good at this. For those of you that like your soccer, Gareth Southgate used to be the England soccer manager. He's stepped down from that role now. It was widely recognised that he was very open to feedback from his fellow coaches, from his players. The best coaches I've seen and worked with in sport are all the same. They give feedback to the people around them, but they're very comfortable receiving it. Gareth Southgate is an internationally recognised example of that in practice. Now, I would love to be musical. Sadly, I'm not. But if you look at high performers in music, orchestral bands, singers, whichever niche you look at, you find the highest performers seek feedback. Yo-Yo Ma, a globally renowned cellist, approaches his performances a bit like that elite athlete model, seeking feedback from other musicians, from coaches, mentors, looking for ways to improve. You go into business. Mary Barra, the CEO of General Motors, was famous for calling those town hall meetings, from seeking out the tough questions and responding without our ego being in the way. And that's the phrase that you hear a lot when you talk about respected business leaders. And I talk to clients about people that model this well. They'll talk about that particular leader gaining their trust, gaining their admiration, because they seem to have an ability to put their ego to one side. So going back to those earlier points, they were not being defensive. They were not deflecting. They were not discrediting the source. They were inviting it, as in the case of the CEO of General Motors. Just 3 quick examples that come to mind. As I always say, I read around my topics. There are so many in my head, but for the interest of brevity, I just wanted to throw those out, but ask you that key question. Who have you ever worked for or with that gives good feedback, but also receives feedback well? There'll be somebody there, and what did they do? Now you've got that person in your mind, let me step into some of the tips that I want you to consider, and perhaps you'll see some of this modeled by the individual you've currently got in your mind. Tip number 1, assume positive intent. We have to get rid of, once and for all, this notion that if somebody brings us constructive criticism, it's somehow an attack on our integrity, our competency, our intelligence. It's none of those things. It's somebody having the courage to come forward with feedback about a specific incident, piece of performance, or moment in time, designed not to humiliate or intimidate, but to address and help you as an individual and those around you improve as a consequence of that feedback. We must embrace that mindset that this is an opportunity for growth and development. It's not an attack, and there is no need to feel defensive. We talked earlier about the triple Ds, the defensive element, the deflection, the discrediting. You can't start that process. You can't start deflecting, which takes me into the second tip. Listen fully. Do not interrupt. Let the deliverer of the feedback finish and let it land. Give yourself time to absorb that particular piece of feedback without interrupting them and starting that deflection or discrediting the source that we talked about earlier. Let them finish. Tip number 3, take notes. It's a simple mechanism to allow you to gather your thoughts, to truly let that feedback land, but it has a secondary benefit in my experience that it helps regulate emotion. If we're going to avoid our ego driving us to be defensive or to begin deflecting or to begin discrediting the source, we need a couple of simple steps to help regulate our emotions, and being able to just put pen to paper and take notes and digest the feedback both through our listening and also by capturing it in note format is a very, very good way to help you process and to prevent you from interrupting, to allow you to listen fully, going back to the earlier point. Tip number 4, ask clarifying questions. Your ego will begin to bubble up. You can feel yourself getting defensive. It's very easy to dismiss things and say, well, that's not the case. I don't believe that. I'm just going to disregard that. However, the courageous thing to do is, can you give me an example of that? You know, if somebody believes that you're doing something wrong or an element of your leadership is upsetting or intimidating or just not having the desired impact you want it, ask them to clarify the feedback. And the best way to clarify feedback is, could you give me an example? Now that will help you really step through your ego and say, that's valid. That's substantive. It's factual. I understand exactly what they mean now. Or, nope, this is not something I'm inclined to agree with. Either way, it's much better than just jumping back into our defensive, deflecting position. So taking the notes, helping us absorb and process it, takes us into asking clarifying questions. Tip number 5, say thank you. Why thank you, I hear you ask? Well, because when somebody comes to you with feedback, it takes courage, especially if that feedback is at risk of being perceived negatively. It's very easy to feed back to people when they're doing well. Well done, congratulations, this is great, more of the same, thank you. Yep, that's easy. But when you're giving somebody feedback up or down the proverbial chain of command, and you're going to say to somebody, I don't think you're quite meeting the standards expected, or the way you are doing A or B is not landing particularly well with me or with the wider team, or the way you handled situation X, you know full well it's not necessarily, for all the reasons we've talked about in the podcast so far, going to land particularly well. So what do we tend to do? Well, we don't do anything. And this is the absolute Achilles heel I find in so many good, steady, solid teams in sport and in business. The thing that's stopping them going from good and steady and solid to elite and truly world class is they dance around the difficult conversations. They give feedback when things are going well, but they do not give feedback when things are not going well. It's that conflict avoidance. It's the curse, particularly in the British office, that we just don't want to upset people. So hopefully they'll work it out. Or we'll talk in wandering riddles and non-confrontational style, and they'll work it out eventually. No, they won't. They'll be lost in the reeds of ambiguity. It needs somebody to have the courage to say, can I specifically talk to you about A or B? So if someone has had that courage, even more so when it's somebody junior to you, really do recognize that and appreciate that they are really outside their comfort zone and they're doing it for a positive reason. Who in the right mind wants to offend the boss? Who wants to upset somebody? Unless you've got some sort of personality disorder, none of us do. So that brave individual that's come to you with a negative feedback that people might be thinking but don't have the courage to say, you need to admire that and really make a mental note once you've processed and moved your ego to say, wow, I need to keep a close eye on that individual because it took a lot of guts and courage to bring that to me in the first place. And that guts and courage could mean they've got real potential for more seniority and autonomy and leadership in the future. Tip number 6, breathe. I'd love to say that employing all of these tips will mean that you can just click your fingers and you will suddenly become a ego-free, completely chilled receiver of feedback. It doesn't work like that. There will be certain things that trigger you, certain things that antagonize and irritate you. And yes, some of these steps will help regulate those emotions. Taking notes, asking clarifying questions, respecting people's courage, saying thank you. But you will still at times be wrestling with a desire to dive back into that old model of defending yourself or deflecting or indeed discrediting the individual or the particular piece of feedback that's coming your way. Take a deep breath. Help regulate those stress hormones, that cortisol, that adrenaline that's going through your system so that you are much more balanced. Because it's not particularly endearing. It's certainly not particularly inspiring for those around you if they see their leader losing their head on the receiving end of some negative feedback. But if they see you breathe, they see you remain composed and in control of your emotions, that sets a standard that inspires people to say, well, that can't have been difficult to hear, but I admire the way they received it. Going back to that earlier point of the individual you admired, I'm sure lots of these things that we're touching on here, they model consistently. I'm sure they weren't interrupting people. I'm sure they asked clarifying questions. I'm sure they took notes. I'm sure they were grateful for people bringing the feedback. I'm sure they controlled their emotions. They breathed. They took a little bit of time. And those people that perhaps you haven't respected as much or haven't clicked as much with as a leader, now that you think about it, perhaps they're on the different side of all of these individual points. That's why it's so important to reflect, because what I'm telling you, you will have seen. You will have seen elements of this. You will probably deliver elements of this yourself, no doubt. And equally, you will see the people who struggle in the ability to give and take feedback because they don't embrace a lot of these traits. So that's why I asked you to reflect and think of someone you admire, because it helps anchor all these points in. Tip number 7, reflect before responding. Now, that reflection may take place there and then. Perhaps it's in the very same meeting. Perhaps it's the ability to take notes. It's taking that breath. It's actively listening without interrupting people. And by the time you get to the end of that process, you're able to move forward and truly dissect what's being said, take out the learnings for you as an individual or the wider team, and start to build out an action plan of how do we ensure we course correct, change the elements of strategy or perhaps individual leadership style that's not working, and make those changes immediately. But, and there's nothing wrong with this, you may have been really rattled, antagonized, or upset by the feedback. Take a time out. Now, that's very personal to you. It may just be, look, I'm just going to reflect on this. Let's come back together this afternoon. Let's all just take a couple of hours. I'm going to get a coffee, get some lunch, and just buy yourself the space to truly reflect. Perhaps it's later in the day. Right, I'm going to sleep on this. Thank you for the feedback. Let's come back together in the morning. There's no right and wrong, but what you're trying to do is give yourself enough time to process, bring down that emotional thermostat so that you don't make knee-jerk reactions, so that you don't get sucked back in, and you're sick of me saying it now, but you're sucked back into those deflections or those defensive words and behaviors, or worse, the criticism of the source, the discreditation of the source. We don't want to drift into that space. So if you need to give yourself time to prevent you from doing that and to truly process, what part of this feedback do I agree with? It needs you to take the lead there. We've all been in meetings that we look back and go, I regret how I responded there. I was too emotional. I was too upset. Well, don't allow that to happen. Give yourself time to reflect and then respond. And that takes me into my final point. Do not fear showing visible change. None of us have a crystal ball. None of us, going back to my earlier analogy, can get every decision and every element of our performance right every day, week, month, quarter, year of our leadership tenures. We're not deluded. We all know that deep down. So there is nothing wrong with making changes. tweaking a piece of strategy, getting rid of a strategy altogether, adopting how we do certain things. Perhaps it's how you give and take feedback. Perhaps that's what's been brought to you, that you're not particularly good at that. It's upsetting people. It's not inspiring people, and you need to reflect and change. Whatever it is, once you've had that period of reflection, perhaps, as we said, within the same meeting, perhaps within the same day, perhaps you slept on it, perhaps you took a couple of days. But once you've reflected, if that feedback is valid, you showing change has a ripple effect. It inspires the individual who had the courage to bring the feedback to your door to do it again, because it hasn't just been defended, dismissed, and discredited. They've seen that you've absorbed it and you've made a change. Equally, it inspires other people to say, oh, well, I feel that there's a psychological safety here in our organisation, that we can give and take feedback respectfully and professionally, but just because it's a senior member of my team or one of the senior leaders in the organisation, we are all humble enough and embracing a growth mindset that says, if somebody feels we can improve, let's discuss it. Let's give and take feedback without taking it personally or taking offense. That is the elixir. That is what we're driving towards, the true X factor of high performance. You'll know it when you've got it, and I'm pretty certain that you probably don't have it yet. There will be some people willing to give and take, but we can all get better, and there will be other people very, very defensive. So it is a work in progress. There is no silver bullet, but hopefully these podcasts and these reflections give you a start point, a bit of a roadmap to say, these are some of the things we can start to do. Once you get to that space, it is a game changer for performance. Once we can just step back from a situation and say, let's look at that. What went well? These three things. Well done to you. Thank you to you. Excellent best practice from you. Let's ripple that out through the team. What didn't go well? Okay, I'll spend some one-on-one time with you. Let's buddy you up over here with this mentor. Let's dissect that. Let's disseminate that into the team. Off we go. And we're just constantly reflecting on those questions. What's going well? What's not going well? How do we improve? What's going well? What's not going well? How do we improve? It is a simple, simple process, but reflect on your style, reflect on your team. Are you comfortable doing that yet? Don't beat yourself up and say, no, we're nowhere near. Very few teams are, but you can get there. And so these episodes are designed to help you there. And for those of you that want to explore in more detail, that would like to reach out and explore how I might be able to work with you individually or your wider team, then do please get in touch, DM through LinkedIn, use the email addresses. All the details are there in the show notes. But this is something that is easy to change with the right buy-in from the leader and the staff, but it needs focus, it needs attention, and it needs to be done if you want to be a truly high-performing team. You've got to be able to give and take feedback. So I wish you the best of luck with all of these tips. As I said at the start, if you haven't listened to the episode prior to this one on giving feedback, please dive into the show notes. You'll find the link to that episode. And I would love, as ever, to hear your feedback on the content, how it's helped you, and other suggestions and ideas for future content. I wish you the best of luck. Thanks for listening to the Lonely Leader podcast. I'd be very grateful if you could share and follow if the content resonates. And if you're looking for additional free resource to support your continued growth and development, then please do check out our social media and website details in the show notes. Remember, quality leadership on the outside must always start within.